Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Stephen Carroll, and this is Here's Why, where we take one news story and explain it in just a few minutes with our experts here at Bloomberg.
He should resign immediately. We should get somebody in there that's going to lower interest rates. Always too late, a little slow, and I'm not happy with him. Too late. I call him Too Late Powell because he's always too late. Too Late Powell, that's his nickname, and it's a shame. It's ridiculous. I mean, he goes out pretty soon, fortunately, because I think he's terrible. You ever have a guy that's not a smart person and you're dealing with him and you have to deal? He's not a smart guy. I'd love him to resign if he wanted to. He's done a lousy job. And the fake news is saying, oh, if you fired him, it would be so bad. It would be so bad. I don't know why it would be so bad.
It's become one of the US president's most common complaints. Donald Trump wants lower interest rates, and he thinks Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell isn't doing it fast enough. Powell's term heading up the US Central Bank runs until May of next year, but the president and his allies are taking every opportunity to criticise him. A recent controversy over the renovation of a Federal Reserve building has again raised the question of whether Trump could remove the Fed chair before his term is up. But here's why it's not easy to fire Jerome Powell. Our Federal Reserve reporter, Amara Omeokwe, joins me now for more. Amara, great to talk to you. We've spoken before about Donald Trump criticising Jerome Powell. Have those complaints changed since he returned to the White House?
So essentially, no, they haven't. President Donald Trump, since he returned to office in January, has essentially been upset with the Federal Reserve because they have not lowered interest rates so far this year. And so his criticisms of Chair Powell and the Fed largely center around this idea that he wants lower rates, and the Fed has not provided that for him this year. Those really mirror some of the same complaints that he had about Powell and the Fed during his first term. He often called for lower rates during his first term. But this time, the complaints have been really, really relentless. And they've also taken on sort of this personal nature where President Trump has basically started calling Jerome Powell various names. He's given him the nickname Too Late to basically suggest that Chair Powell is often too late to make policy adjustments, and various other names. So the attacks have gone beyond sort of Chair Powell's stance on interest rates to kind of the more personal nature. And then, as you were talking about in the intro, this new line of attack is about this $2.5 billion renovation project that the Fed is undergoing now at its headquarters in Washington, D.C. And that has opened up a new line of criticism from President Trump and some of his allies.
So how far has the president gone in saying that he wants to remove Jerome Powell from his job?
So most recently, the president has kind of said again that he does not plan to remove Chair Powell from his job. Earlier in the year, he had posted on social media that, Chair Powell's termination cannot come fast enough. And that had sort of made people speculate about whether he would try to remove him. But then the markets freaked out a little bit. And so he kind of backed off of that and has continued to say that he's going to allow Chair Powell to continue to serve in his role. But what's interesting about this renovation project is that some of the people in Trump's orbit have started to suggest that the issue could amount to cause to fire Jerome Powell, which is a legal term. Around the Fed, there is this very high legal standard. In order to be able to remove someone from the Federal Reserve's Board of Governors, you need to have what's called cause. And the courts have generally taken that to mean like malfeasance or neglect of duty. So the fact that someone in the Trump administration is saying that this issue could amount to cause has caused people to start to wonder, okay, are people in Trump's world trying to kind of lay the groundwork to say, President Trump, if you wanted to remove him, you could have the ability to do that because this issue has given you the cause. So there's been some speculation about that, despite the fact that publicly President Trump has continued to say he does not plan to remove Chair Powell.
So let's talk about this renovation issue then. What do we know about what's happened and whether or not it could meet that legal definition?
So I will say the legal experts that I've talked to about this issue say that they do not think that it rises to the level of cause. But essentially what has happened is that in recent weeks, this renovation project that the Fed has been doing really for several years has come to the forefront again. So there was a media report that characterized this renovation as very extravagant. They called it essentially the Palace of Versailles, which if you know the Palace of Versailles, very ornate, huge, right? Louis XIV. And so that kind of brought this issue to the forefront. So when Chair Powell was on the Hill last month testifying before senators, he was asked about this. And he kind of disputed some of what that media report was talking about. He talked about, we don't have these ornate features. We don't have a bunch of new marble. We don't have, elevators going up to private dining rooms, really kind of pushing back on this idea that the project is overly ornate. And so what we then saw after the hearing was one of the Trump administration officials, Bill Pulte, who's the head of one of the federal housing agencies, come out and say that he felt that Chair Powell had not been honest during that testimony about some of these features. And that's what he's saying rises to the level of cause. And then you had Russ Vought of the Office of Management and Budget at the White House last week come out and send a letter to Chair Powell, again, saying this doesn't add up. We're very concerned about this. I want you to answer several questions about this project. And then Vought said that Powell had also grossly mismanaged the Fed. So again, kind of strong language, kind of suggesting that Powell had done something wrong. And that's, again, what's kind of driving this speculation that maybe they're trying to set up this cause to remove him. But what the Fed says is that this renovation has been going on for several years. It involves 2 historic buildings. And so that requires a lot of, they have to sort of adhere to the laws around preserving historic buildings. They have to take a lot of steps to make sure that these buildings aren't harmed. And also the Fed has said that these renovation projects will allow them to put all their staff, kind of consolidate their staff all in one place, and that will save money over the long term. So really, a lot of this is in the eyes of the beholder. If you want to kind of go after Powell and the Fed, you're using this as your opportunity. But the Fed, they're really just pushing back against this idea that it's overly extravagant.
Has Jerome Powell ever indicated that he might give in to all of this pressure and actually resign from the job?
No indication whatsoever. He has said several times previously that he plans to serve out the duration of his chair term. And if you take the Fed at its word, and they have said that Chair Powell was honest in his testimony. They said that they are happy to be transparent about this project and provide more information about it. They don't feel like they've done anything wrong. So if you take the Fed at its word and you take what Chair Powell has said about intending to serve out the duration of his term, it really doesn't seem like he's going to give in to this pressure at all.
So all of the indications are that Jerome Powell will serve, as you say, to the end of his term. Scott Bessent, the US Treasury Secretary, has said the formal process to find his replacement has started. When should we expect Donald Trump to name someone? And is there then a question that Jerome Powell becomes some sort of lame duck if we already know who's going to replace him?
Yes. So Bessent has said that this process is going to be going on in the weeks and months. And I think trying to game out when President Trump is going to do anything is kind of not a winning game, right? He's known to change his mind on things, to go back and forth on things. We've seen that on a number of issues. And so who knows? But I will say that an interesting question that has also come up. So Chair Powell's term as chair is up in May 2026, but his term as a governor on the Fed board goes on into 2028. And so that actually means that Chair Powell has the option to stay on the Fed board even after his chair term is up. And when he's been asked whether he does intend to stay on the board, even when he's no longer chair, he has declined to answer. So that has raised some eyebrows like, is he going to stay on the board to kind of safeguard in case President Trump picks someone who is seen as a potential threat to Fed independence, so he can stay there and kind of hold the line against someone like that? And so that is another sort of wrinkle that has come up for the Trump administration as they begin this election process. And you saw Treasury Secretary Bessent say yesterday, Chair Powell should leave when his chair term is up. He should not stay, because obviously if he stays on the board, then that creates question about where the real sort of nexus of power and influence lies, even after the president names who he wants to take over the chair role. So a lot of interesting wrinkles in this whole process starting to come up.
Yeah, and we'll watch the developments with interest. Our Federal Reserve reporter, Amara Omeokwe, thank you very much for joining us. For more explanations like this from our team of 3,000 journalists and analysts around the world, go to bloomberg.com/explainers. I'm Stephen Carroll. This is Here's Why. I'll be back next week with more. Thanks for listening.